Hi everyone, welcome to Better Reading. You know this segment, we'll tell you what we're reading and you tell us what you're reading. So just type in the comments what you're reading, we'll read them out and get there. But as you can see next to me, I have the lovely Heather Morris. Of course, you know her books, The Tattooist of Auschwitz. We've got Stories of Hope, Silka's Journey, and Three Sisters. A fantastic backlist, and I know so many of you are a fan of hers. And I would also like to talk about Sisters Under the Rising Sun, which is Heather Morris's latest book coming out very, very soon. Welcome, Heather.
Thank you. Hello. It's wonderful to be here.
Thank you for being here. Do you want to give us a little chat about Sisters Under the Rising Sun?
Oh, do I ever? And look, I'm really, really honoured to be telling this story. For the first time, folks, I've written a story which will include some Australians and New Zealanders, well, one in particular. So to be now bringing a story home to where I live and to be talking about people who, if you do not know about these people I've written about, and I suspect many of you haven't, then can I say you jolly well should. And I'm hoping if you do take the time and trouble to learn a little bit about these amazing Australian nurses, that yes, you will be the richer for knowing that part of your history, because it pretty much has been, well, not denied, just ignored. So Sisters Under the Rising Sun, it's about Australian nurses, English women, Dutch nuns, Singapore, New Zealanders, Chinese, one amazing American woman who were held captive by the Japanese during the Second World War in the jungles of Sumatra, Indonesia, for over 3.5 years. It is a true story. I'll tell you more about it later.
It sounds very impactful and so much to unpack in this. We're very, 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 very much looking forward to reading this. So just get to some of the comments. Christine says, hi, Heather and Natalie. Heather, I love your books.
Thank you.
Sharon says, hi, Natalie and Heather. Jill says, hello. Julie says, hello. Sally says she loves your books, Heather.
Oh, thank you, darling.
Stacey says that Sisters Under the Rising Sun is on her TBR. And she is an old but still practicing registered nurse.
Oh, thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
So I think that one will relate to her a lot.
Yes.
Wendy says, good afternoon. She's read 4 of your previous books, Heather, and enjoyed them all. Sharon is reading Black Lies by Mercedes Mercier, really enjoying it. I think we promoted that a few weeks ago and very, very popular. Meredith says, hello to both of you. She's just started reading The Invisible Women's Club by Helen Paris. Della says she loves your books, Heather, and will definitely be reading a new one. Carolyn says, hello, Heather and Natalie. She's reading The Raging Storm by Anne Cleeves and thoroughly enjoying it so far. Alita says, hi, ladies. I'm reading The Last Devil to Die by Richard Osman. Highly entertaining. And that brings us to talk about our book of the week, which is The Last Devil to Die. It's the 4th book in the series, and it brings back our favorite octogenarians. It offers a generous and compassionate look at companionship and connection at any age. I know a lot of you are big fans of the Thursday Murder Club, and this is the 4th book, so definitely check it out if you haven't. Another one in a series is Roger Simpson's latest book, which is Resurrection. This is brings back Jane Halifax, who you all know. She's back in this one, and after a terrible accident, she's lost her memory. And in order to retrieve her memories, she has to solve a 30-year-old cold case to try and retrieve those. We had an event with Roger Simpson a few weeks ago, so if you didn't see that, definitely hop onto our page and go and check that out. Heather, would you like to share what you've been reading with us?
Yeah, look, but before I do that, can I send a special message to Stacey?
Yes.
Stacey, this is for you. It's actually, I'm going to read you the dedication in my book because it will resonate with you. It's for you. To nurses everywhere, past, present, and future, you make the world a better place.
Wow.
Stacey, all your colleagues and friends and everybody who has been, is, and will be a nurse.
That is fantastic. Stacey, I hope you heard that, and definitely one for all the nurses out there. Thanks for sharing that, Heather. Yes, so if you want to let us know what you've been reading.
Yeah, look, I've just finished reading it. Look, it's a manuscript, so you're going to have to wait for this. But I so enjoyed it, and it's by a debut novelist. And, you know, I can still recall it was only a couple of years ago that I was one of these people. And so for me to be given the chance to read a manuscript of a new novel by a debut novelist and to so enjoy it, then, yeah, I'm going to talk about it and I'm going to shout about it.
Mm-hmm.
And this is so it kind of connects a little way to the stories I've written in the past, but with a very different angle. It's called The Sunflower House, and it's written by Adriana Allegri. She writes this incredible story about a program that existed. Well, it started in 1938 in Germany by Hitler and Himmler. And it was called the Liebesstrom program. And what it was that those men deciding to produce the master race. And they created in Germany, this is before the war came into being, this program of these houses or homes all around Germany. They were getting volunteers of German women, and there were women being sort of roped into it, and there were other German women being kidnapped. And what they were to do were to be the breeding factories for the pure Aryan race.
Mm.
So these girls themselves and these women, some of them, by the way, were as young as 15. And this is true. This part of it is true. Okay. Adriana's story is based on it and is created. But these girls, as young as 15, many of them who volunteered, they were having baby after baby, one every 12 months. And they had already passed the necessary purity tests.
Mm.
And so they were being partnered up with SS officers just to breed.
Wow.
And so Adriana has created this story based on that real program that existed. Taken a girl from part of Germany who was actually one of the ones who was kidnapped and taken into one of these homes to breed. What that girl didn't know until only a few days before she was taken in was that her mother, who she never met, who had died when she was little, had been Jewish. And then she found that out. Now she finds herself supposedly having to breed children, pure Aryan children, and the complications that's clearly going to bring up for her. The saving grace for her is an SS officer who's running that program at the home where she is. He has a secret too, and it's the same secret she has, and they connect. Now, I know this sounds weird that we're being asked to read a story where quite a high-ranking SS Nazi officer we're being asked to like. But you know, folks, you can like Karl, because he, like many others who got swept away, we all want to believe there could be no such thing as a good German during the war. But what he and Alina, the girl, what they set about doing are saving some of these babies in this home. And particularly the ones, because you can imagine that these babies are all being bred. And half of them, after about 6 months, they've been given out to foster homes because their mothers have to get pregnant again. And that really happened. This really happened. But not all the babies are perfect. And so they're not being sent to these foster homes to become the good Germans of the future. Quite the opposite. They're being sent to those evil, evil people who wore a white coat and had the audacity to call themselves a doctor for the purpose of experimenting. What went wrong? Why are these children not perfect? And so the friendship, which becomes a relationship, becomes an incredible love story between Alina and Karl, and who they actually do marry, but it twists and turns, of course. And yeah, he makes the ultimate sacrifice to be able to get her and their child, because they have a child, away. The story starts, which I think is really beautiful, in New York, with this woman sort of in her 60s who goes to her mother's home because she's had a fall. And I'm giving away spoiler alerts here, but it should not stop you wanting to read the story.
No.
But she finds in her mother's wardrobe, hidden away, a box, and it's got swastika symbol on it. And it's that point that she confronts her mother and she learns about her past and the fact that she was the child of an SS Nazi officer.
Wow.
So there's a lot for her to sort of unpack as she's learning of her past. And this brave woman in her well into her 80s now telling this story as it plays out. So that's the
Wow.
Sunflower House, and
That's fascinating. And do you know when that one might be coming out? Or
yeah, I think it's March next year.
March
So
next
we've got a
year.
bit to wait.
So
but,
keep your eyes peeled for that one, and remember that name, The Sunflower House. That sounds like a fantastic novel.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing that. Okay, Judy has almost finished All That's Left Unsaid by Tracy Liane. Great book. Della is reading Your Stories of Hope and by you, Heather Morris. And
Thank you.
she loves the message of listen.
Yes.
I have Julie has just finished reading Claire Keegan's Foster, such a beautifully told story. Malvina says, thanks for your books, Heather. Always
You're
good to learn more from our past. I've just finished Murder in the Pacific, Ifira Point by Matt Francis, set in Vanuatu. It's a fabulous debut. Well, it seems that we've been talking a lot about debut novels with the one that you're talking about. One that I'd like to point out is The Modern by Anna Kate Blair. This is both playful and profound, inhabiting the gap between what we feel about ourselves and how we seem. The Modern is an irresistible debut novel about desire, art, and the paradoxes of a precarious generation. It's coming-of-age sexual identity type of debut novel and unpacks so much. It lets you really question if you're on the right path, does it lead you to the wrong place? So if you haven't added this one to your TBR, we definitely recommend it. I think it's a great weekend read. So add that to your TBR maybe for this weekend. Okay. Jane has just finished reading The Wedding Party by Kathy Kelly and Strangers. Now she's reading When the Singing Stops by Di Morrissey, all great reads. Jill has just started reading The French Gift by Kirsty Manning.
Oh, beautiful book.
Yeah.
Love Kirsty's writing.
We love that one as well. Wendy is presently reading ebook Snapshots from Home by Sasha Walsley and has just finished an audio book Becoming Mrs. Mulberry by Jackie French, another nurse here. That's Wendy. So Wendy, I'm sure you heard the fabulous dedication to Sisters Under the Rising Sun, which is Heather Morris's book, which is coming out soon. So keep an eye out for that one, dedicated to you. And speaking of Snapshots from Home by Sasha Walsley, we recently recorded a podcast with her, and that podcast is out now, as well as another podcast called Food Wise by Lucy Bell and Lucy Leonardi. Cheryl recorded a podcast with Lucy Leonardi, and that's also coming out, I think, today in a few hours. So check that one out. One other book that I'd like to talk about is Amy Doak's Eleanor Jones is Not a Murderer. So this is a YA book, and I know we don't always talk about YA novels here, but I think this is an interesting one. It's about Eleanor Jones, who's quite a shy girl, and she's on to her 9th high school and struggles to make friends. So she finally makes a friend on her first day, which is quite rare for her, but he ends up getting stabbed and murdered, and she's the suspect and sort of has to go on this journey to solve the crime and help with that. So that's an interesting one. Check it out. So I've now mentioned a YA book and a kids book, and I want to use that as a segue to talk about our top 50 kids list, which is releasing next week on Thursday. So tune into this segment at 2 p.m. because we'll have a special guest with the person who's taken the first place, which is a fantastic book, an author you might or might not all know and love. I'm trying not to give away any spoilers, but definitely tune in for that. We also have a few more events, so I'm going to take this opportunity to talk about those. We've got the Crime Author Panel, which I know a lot of you have seen us promoting. We had the Bondi Beach location at Gertrude and Alice, but so many of you outside of Sydney really wanted to tune into this event. So we've actually moved that to be here in the Better Reading office, and we're also going live on Facebook with that. So whether you're in Sydney, you can come through. Make sure to RSVP to Jane, and her email is in the event description. But if you'd like to, so that's if you want to come in person, but if you're not from Sydney and would like to see that, it's with Dave Warner, Karen Herbert, and David Wish-Wilson. So tune in at 7:30 p.m. next week on Thursday for that as well. So we've got 2 great events happening next Thursday. Okay, I'll continue with a few more comments. Emma says, hello, Better Reading team. Holly says, currently reading Jessie Stevens' new book. Stacey says, thank you, Heather. That's the one who you dedicated this to. Thank you, Heather. And on behalf of all my colleagues, it's a wonderful profession. Not easy, but so rewarding. So thank you for that. Ross says, is reading Operation Jubilee by Patrick Bishop. Sonia says, hi, Heather. I've loved your books.
Hi, Sonia.
Denise says, hello, Natalie and Heather. I love Sisters Under the Rising Sun. I was very lucky to receive a preview copy of the book thanks to Better Reading. I love your books, Heather.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, so we ran a preview campaign on that one, so a lot of people might have read that here. And, yeah, Denise really loved that. Jessica is reading A Secret Garden Affair by Erica James. Cindy has just finished Daisy and Kate by Meredith Appleyard and starting Nita Praise's book, The Maid. That one was on my TBR list last year. I really loved that one. So hope you enjoy that one, Cindy. Would you like to tell us a bit more about what you're reading, Heather?
Okay, let me just quickly flip, because what I'm reading right now, I think I'll bring that up sort of towards the end. So others might want to comment on the book that I have read, that hopefully some of you will have read and you'll know what I'm talking about. The book is To Kill a Mockingbird by Harper Lee.
Yes, it is.
Now, I read this too many decades ago to mention, okay, don't go there. However, I was in London earlier this year and I went to a play in the West End. It is To Kill a Mockingbird, but it's not the original adaptation. I guess I really went because the person whose adaptation it was is my favourite screenwriter, Aaron Sorkin. So his name actually appears before the title. Sorry, Harper. But it is Aaron Sorkin's adaptation of To Kill a Mockingbird. And it is simply a brilliant, brilliant play. He's done, as I knew he would, an incredible job. A typical Sorkin style of people talking over each other and sort of walk and talk type situations, but brilliant. But it got me thinking again when I got home and I went, I need to revisit this book. I need to remind myself of what it meant and did for me when I read it all those decades ago. So again, in terms of, I guess it's not necessarily popular. I don't even know if it's on school curriculums anymore, anywhere.
I think it might be, yeah.
Yeah, I hope so, because it's really topical. It's never going to lose it being a topical story because of what it's about, which is racism and survival and injustice, all these themes which they permeate all our lives, every generation. They don't go away. But Harper Lee, in her story, she smacks you in the face with it, so you have to think about it yourself. And it reminds you that, I keep thinking of a saying that Lully used to say, and it goes back to all of this, and it goes back to this whole notion of who we are and the fact that why can't we accept that we're just all bloody humans and get on with it? Because for him, being in that concentration camp for so long, he said to me many times, what does it matter what colour you are or your religion? Because when you're shot, not if, they're expected to be shot. When you're shot, you all bleed the same colour, red. We do, because we're all the same, we're human. And I was, really delighted to go back and go through this book again after having seen this brilliant play. But I'm going to recommend this one to anyone who hasn't read it, and even those of you like me who read it decades ago, do it again.
I tend to do that. I find if I've read something when I was younger, I like to revisit it when I'm older, because you have a different outlook on life, with what you go through personally. And I think, like you said, this opened your eyes to reading it. And I'm sure every time you read it, you might see something new or discover something new or read it in a different light. So I guess that brings me to ask you guys in the comments if you can leave a comment to let us know if there are any classics that you've reread decades later or a few years later and had a different outlook on it. So let us know that. Did you want to talk about the other book as well?
Yeah, just following up on it. When you're told to read it at school and you read it and you get all the points, you go, yeah, I've got it. I've written the essay, I've got the A for it, or maybe a B or a C, but whatever. But I think until you've had some life experience and just a little bit of maturity, you don't have to be as mature as I am, guys, you then take something different from it. You then actually understand it. You don't just parrot back what it was you learned from it. You actually feel it and you get it.
It's 100%. I studied literature obviously at school, did bachelor's and master's in English literature. And I felt you read it for a different purpose. You're not reading it for yourself and to take in your own life experience. You're reading it just to dissect every piece, to write an essay on it. So when I've gone back and reread things that I had to study, I'm like, wow, I read it completely differently the first time. And then you sort of come back and you read it in a new light. It's fascinating.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Go maturity.
Yes. And growth and all of those things,
exactly.
right? Okay, I'll read a few more comments here. Emma's just finished The Housemaid by Frida McFadden, a fast and fun read. Christine is currently reading The Chasm by Bronwyn Hall. Love the suspense and thrills. Linda is reading Dilly's Dream by Dilly Court. Love that they are part of a series. Cheryl is partway into reading Lessons in Chemistry, like this program, and have often read books after hearing recommendations. So do you want to tell us a little bit more about Sisters Under the Rising Sun, maybe for the people who missed out at the beginning of the segment?
Absolutely. But there are two main characters in this. There should be 500. But of course, when trying to have a story and tell a story that readers can follow, well, even as a writer you can follow, you've got to be sensible and pare it back. And it is the story of these incredibly brave Australian women who volunteered to be nurses and they joined the army, so they are part of the Australian Army, and they were sent to Malaya in Singapore in 1941. That's where the war was coming down through that part of Asia. The Australian troops were there, they were sent there. Now, as the troops, the Japanese came down through Malaya, the nurses fled along with other colonial people, the British and the Dutch and the New Zealanders, they fled down to Singapore. So all of a sudden there's this a migration of people out of Malaya to Singapore. And in Singapore, the Japanese do land on that. They were never meant to get there. The British were quite convinced that Singapore would never fall. Huge contingent of Australian Army men and 65 nurses. Now these nurses, there was some push to try and get them off the island before things went really pear-shaped, but it didn't happen. Half of them managed to get out on a boat a couple of days before Singapore fell. But there was some 32 of them who were still there. Now, the other main character in this book is a lady called Nora Chambers. 2 days before she left, she took her 8-year-old daughter. Her husband was extremely ill. He was in hospital in Singapore. But she put her 8-year-old daughter, Sally, on a boat and to leave Singapore with her aunt and 2 young cousins. So that's significant, young Sally. 2 days later, Nora and her husband know they have to leave. They happen to get onto the same boat, fleeing, as the Australian nurses. This boat, within about 36 hours or so, is bombed and sunk. Those who survived the sinking are just washed up onto the shores of Sumatra, of Indonesia, Bangka Island. And that's where the story then starts, as these men and women are rounded up by the Japanese. Other boats that the Japanese invaded and took prisoners from too, which is why there were so many hundreds of them. They separated the men from the women and children. And for the next 3 years, 7 months, because Nesta James, who was my main character, Sister Nesta James, she would not hear of it being said she survived 3.5 years. It was 3 years, 7 months. And how they endured their confinement or their internship, whatever you want to call it. But by the way, they would not allow the nurses to be called prisoners of war, even though they were military. Wow. The Japanese said, no, you're women. So Nesta and Nora, Nesta and her nurses, of course, they brought their skills as nurses, even though they had no equipment, they had no medicine, they had nothing. How can they keep people alive who are injured, who suffer these incredible tropical diseases? And then there's Nora. Her sister Ina is with her as well. Nora was a brilliant musician trained at the Royal Academy of Music in London. Together with a missionary, Margaret Driver, they started forming choirs to entertain the women. You can see on the bottom of this some music, some notes, a score. That is the original score written by Nora 80 years ago in the jungles of Sumatra.
Wow.
I have held the original document
Wow.
along with several others that made it out.
That's amazing.
And the music, well, it was one thing for them to have choirs. And by the way, the Australian nurses, being good Aussies, they put on plays and they put on skits and, you know, took the mickey out of the Japanese. And this is just incredible women doing what they can to help other women.
Yep.
You know, there've been some research done as to why, when there was a men's camp, they didn't know about it, some 2 or 3 kilometres further in the jungle, that were there the same period of time. And, you know, the men did not survive at the same rate. They did not endure. And one researcher tried to look at why was that, and they come up with what, you know, we could have told them anyway, that women, we form communities.
Yeah.
You know, to us, it's not about, well, you know, who's the highest ranking above us, you know, who's more important.
Yep.
So what these women did, but what Nora did, and the strength of Nora, not only to create music, which she wrote down, I'm talking about the classics, Beethoven, Mozart, Brahms, Mendelssohn. And the piece of music that is on this cover, the piece of music which is so integral to the whole story, is Ravel music Bolero. Because what she did with that was she trained these women to use their voices as instruments. It's called a vocal orchestra. And they then started performing these classics with their voices.
Wow.
With not one instrument.
Wow.
They had the Japanese soldiers there to guard them, attend their concerts and leave in tears.
Wow.
So this beautiful story of the power of music, I guess that's what it's about. This is the power of music, but also the women behind it.
Yep.
The nurses, some of them were in the choir, they were part of the vocal orchestra. And there's another element too, and Stacey and nurses will get this, because for us now, we accept that the forms of therapy which we use today are given to help people, particularly with mental health issues, of music therapy and pet therapy. This was music therapy, Stacey, because that's the impact it had on those hundreds of women. There were also feral dogs that came into the camp, and they would try and share little bits of scraps of food with them. And those dogs became a source of, they got outside the wire. They had that freedom, so they used them as a hope that they too would get outside those wire one day. So we have pet therapy going with feral dogs. There are even a couple of incidences, I think, of some of the other women there having pet rats.
Oh, wow.
Rats apparently the size of cats.
Wow.
But it is, look, yeah, it's kind of a terrible, terrible dark period of our history. But look, I got to say, it is not, I'm not dragging you down into the depths of despair. There is so many incredible, uplifting events and storylines.
Well, it sounds like you're shedding light on some very important parts of history, but also, I guess, showing us some hope and the uplifting side of that as well.
Yeah, because when these girls came back, I'll just sort of wrap it up here. Why you don't know about them is that when they came back, those who survived came back, they were sent home, and they and their families were told, never talk about this again, pretend it never happened.
Yeah.
Our classic case, there was none of the welcoming home that of course soldiers and that we give, and yeah, and we've got a lot to answer for, that we did not do that. We allowed these women to live their lives, never being helped with the trauma that they'd gone through.
Well, thank you for sharing that. I think a lot of people after that will be very excited to read Cities Under the Rising Sun. When's it out again?
It's out next week. Now, we've got a great audio of it. The audio has been read by the lovely Laura Carmichael.
Wow. All
All of you people who watch Downton Abbey will know her as Lady Louise.
Yes.
And she's done an amazing job.
Wow.
And we also have 2 of the pieces of music that Nora wrote.
Wow.
We've had a choir, a vocal choir, perform those on the audio book. In the book, we've got photos of the music scores. And yes, I was lucky to meet that 8-year-old girl who was put on that boat.
Wow.
Who for 4 years thought her parents were dead.
Yeah.
And the parents thought that she was dead. And I got to meet her a couple of times on the island of Jersey as a lady well into her 80s. So Sally, thank you, Sally, for sharing your mum's story.
That's fascinating. Well, that's This is on Under the Rising Sun, out next week. So if you haven't had a chance to read that through our preview program, definitely go get your hands on a copy. The cover is just absolutely stunning and
Yeah.
obviously very intentional with the music notes and everything. So check that out. I'll just wrap this up. We have to wrap this up very soon. But we've got the Crime Author panel, like I mentioned, that is going to be in office if you're in Sydney. So RSVP for that via email. Otherwise, RSVP and tune in live on Facebook. We also, if you all remember our When Love Comes to Town, we did that event in Tamworth a few months ago, and now it's coming to Lismore. So if you're from Lismore, definitely go grab your tickets. It's free entry, but bookings are essential, and you'll get there are some lucky draw prizes, some prizes throughout, and just a fun night, girls' night. So if you want to go in and do that, go for it. We've got Top 50 next week. And just one last thing to mention is our What Are You Reading merchandise. We're doing a flash sale where all white t-shirts are 50% off. That's just for this weekend only. Flash sale, go ahead and grab that. I'm wearing the crew neck, if you can see that here. And we've also got a V-neck. And as you can see, we've got some other things here. We've got a mug, we've got a notebook, tote bags, a few other things as well. So go check those out. Heather, thank you so much for joining us. This was
my
very
absolute pleasure, Natalie.
enlightening segment with you. You've really brought a lot of wisdom to this segment. So thank you so much for that.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody, for what you've done to make my books the success they are here in Australia. I do so appreciate it.
Thank you. And Heather will be doing some tours once the book is out.
Oh, yeah.
So
in
make sure to
November,
check
I'll be
those
doing the
out.
East Coast, okay? I'll come down to
Perfect.
Melbourne, Sydney,
So
Brisbane.
if you want to meet Heather and also get a signed copy of your book, you can go ahead and do that in November. But otherwise, I'll go and read all of these comments again later. Thank you so much for sharing what you're reading, and we'll see you next week.